Welcome back, everybody. I think we're going to start with something. We are going to exclusively reveal something that has been widely reported, which is really our MO here at Spin Cycle Podcast. Uh, so let's talk about Tom Pidcock. Let's talk about all the crazy stuff that's going on over at Ineos and with this particular rider and the drama that is happening inside that team and with Pidcock specifically. So the thing that I can exclusively reveal, but which again has been widely reported, so not so exclusive, is that we do know, we're very sure, for reasons that I wish I could explain, but I cannot, that Q365, the second tier team, is quite far along in their, I guess, sort of approach or attempted acquisition of Tom Pidcock. In fact, I was told that they're expecting to sort of know by the end of this week whether this is going to be happening or not. Both sides seem to be, well, I guess all three sides seem to be pretty keen on it. So obviously Q365, pretty keen on it. Ineos, I think, keen to just get him out of there, which is also why he was not racing Lombardia over the weekend. We'll get to that in a second. And Pidcock himself seems to be quite interested in this project. My guess is because it would afford him a fair amount of leeway and freedom to choose his schedule and all sorts of things. Now, thoughts? Do we think this is a good move? Tom Pidcock, Ineos's highest paid rider, heading to a team that is currently in the second tier and probably won't even race the Tour de France next year?
I think it's I mean, he's going to get he's going to get freedom in the classics. He can do some 1 week stage races. I think every summer we have been the recipients of a lot of spin as to what sort of rider Tom Pidcock is going to be, and I'm not sure that any of us really know yet what he will do with the rest of his career. Obviously, he's great in races like Amstel Gold, and by that, and also the recent Italian classics. Obviously not in Lombardia, but he finished on the podium last week in the rain. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, a Q36.5, Q36.5, whatever, however you wanted to call it. They do seem to be steadily building up a nice little package of riders who can do some big things in the smaller races, and maybe that's what Tom Pidcock needs, is a lot of wins in point one and pro tour races to really kind of prove to himself and to everyone else, look, I am here, I can do this. He's going to be getting paid a decent chunk, I would imagine, or he'd have gone somewhere else. I can't imagine he has no other options. But so yeah, I don't know. I think it would be good to see him get a free run at things. I'm not convinced that he's, well, I don't think he's a Grand Tour racer. I think he gets bored more than anything else. That he wants to be at the front. He doesn't want to sit back and just plod through, finish on the same time as Pog and Fingergirl. I don't think he wants that. He wants to be winning things, and maybe he'll get more of a chance to do that in the lower tier races.
Well, I think the main thing is that at Q36.5, they also need to if you've got a rider like Pidcock, just rebrand the team, call it something else. But at least there he will basically have he'll be able to do what he wants. It's like Aaron Rodgers at the Jets, right? You go to a smaller team where you're the biggest star by far, and whatever you say goes. Whereas at Ineos, he's coming up against management, sort of structure.
Well, he's been acting like that at Ineos, and he's not.
But he is the highest paid rider, and they've paid him that money. And he's won stuff. He's won a lot more than anyone else on that team recently. Yeah. So you can kind of see where he's coming from. I think it's easy to paint him as tempestuous. I think that's because a lot of the time he is. But then if you are an elite athlete and there are things that are not being done to help you, or that you don't think help you, then there's friction there, and the Ineos structure and team is not what it once was. So I think it's probably best for all parties for a fresh start. And if he does, I mean, Q36.5, they could get a Tour de France wildcard maybe off the back of this.
Not next year, they won't.
Possibly.
No? Yeah, not now that Tudia has gone bonkers with their signings.
Yeah, with the
I think probably a Vuelta invite is the most likely thing for them next year. So let's just talk a little bit about this team, though, because I think that this is probably a team that a lot of folks out there, you're hearing this, you maybe heard of Q36.5 as the clothing brand, which I think that maybe the best way to think about them is sort of like an upstart Assos kind of thing, right?
Okay.
They're in the same part of the world, and they're very sort of performance oriented. And the key thing to know about Q36.5 is there is an individual behind that company, which last I checked, he owned about 30% of it, but maybe that could be higher at this point. Guy's name is Ivan Glassenberg. You guys heard of him?
It's it's Glencore, isn't it? Mining,
Yep.
minerals, sorts of things.
So this small team,
money.
it's one that we don't talk about very much. The guy behind it, Ivan Glassenberg, worth somewhere between 10 and 11 billion dollars. Right? He's up in sort of Ratcliffe kind of area. So that's essentially why something like this could happen, right? Because Pidcock's going to get paid what, 3, 4, 5 million euros a year, whatever that ends up being, and 3, 4, 5 million euros a year to Ivan Glassenberg is found behind the couch cushions kind of money, right?
It's also Doug Ryder's chance to get back into cycling.
Correct. So that's the other sort of angle on this, right? So Doug Ryder, some difficulties, but has been running teams for what, more than a decade now, 15
well,
years
yeah,
and
and MTN Quebecer and whatever they became, Dimension Data, and then the unfortunate run-in with crypto or whatever that was supposed to be, which was the downfall. But yeah, no, that team, they were the first African team to race the Tour de France, and then the first, they got a lot of firsts, and they did huge things for sport in that part of the world. They were a team that were easy to like.
Absolutely. And Glassenberg is South African. Lives in Switzerland now, but it was originally South African. I think early on was sort of mining money back in the day. Self-made man kind of thing. So that's sort of the backstory here. We've got a not new entrant, but relatively new entrant to the sort of billionaire club of team owners. And so generally those sort of individuals are not keen to just have a team float around in the second tier, right? Like that's not really probably the end goal for this program. And so I think that, getting somebody like Pidcock is a big first step toward what they're headed towards. So like I would fully expect that they want to gun for a Tour de France invite. They probably want to make it into the World Tour with the next round, right? The sort of round of promotion relegation that we're going to go through. But even before then, I would guess that they're going to go for a Tour de France invite by 2026 or something like that. So if you're Tom Pidcock, okay, maybe you take a year off the tour this summer. Maybe you wanted to do that anyway. You do a little bit of mountain bike racing like you like to do anyway. You still get to get into most of the major spring classics. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the big question in my mind is, how is it going to be materially different from the relationship that started falling apart at Ineos? Because clearly Pidcock is tricky to work with. I think some of the folks at Ineos didn't help that. But if we've got another situation where one rider sees himself as above the entire team, how is that going to work?
That's the big question. I mean, to go back to the whole Lombardia thing on Friday, the best thing ever is always when news breaks at like the evening in Europe on Friday, and it's like, great.
Why don't we tell this story, Johnny? Because this is actually like there's a bit of kind of inside baseball on how that reporting went down.
So Tom Pidcock announces this on his Instagram that he's been deselected despite being very up for the race starting about a night's sleep later.
Yeah,
and that he was ready to go.
A week on from finishing on the podium behind Pogacar at Giro dell'Emilia, so he was in for a shout of doing something, at least the top 10.
Exactly. So he says that Ineos don't really release any sort of statement. The next morning before the start, the Ineos sports director Zach Dempster is sort of cornered by reporters, and like you do, and he's just like, I don't know, like management made their decision. These edicts just get passed down to me, and I do as I'm told. Meanwhile, Pidcock and his like sort of camp also running sort of media channels, posting via his dog's Instagram account, being like, we've driven 12 hours across Europe to watch our dad race in Italy, and now we just have to go on holiday with him instead. What a shame. Which is amazing. It's just good internet stuff.
That's actually how we're going to start announcing things here at Escape, is we're going to only use people's dogs' Instagram account. Kit, does your dog have an Instagram account?
Absolutely not, no. I'm
on.
not his mother either.
Well, you're going to have to start one.
Yeah, it's like my imaginary dog could like be like, unfortunately, Johnny's definitely feeling unwell today, so has to pull a sickie. He'll be right back to work as soon as possible. Anyway, so there's still nothing has come out, but meanwhile
no good information.
but we fell down the same rabbit hole we do every time of trying to find out information when an Ineos story happens, because even these days when we go to like Ineos for comment on things, they won't even give us a no comment these days. It's just like, we do not acknowledge your message, which is I don't know, I quite like it as a press strategy. But we started here
the little blue chicks on WhatsApp acknowledge.
Oh yeah, but, yeah, exactly. But then we started hearing from a couple of different places that Tom Pidcock had got fired from Ineos, like
two different
an hour or two from two different sources. And the reason I think we feel comfortable saying this is because Dan Benson tweeted the same thing. He's like obviously a very good reporter, so he put that into the public realm. So he's the oracle, the whisperer.
Yeah.
He's like that guy in Game of Thrones who just knows what's going on all the time. So then who's saying that he's got fired? Like, where is this, like crossed wires, or is someone out there just like sort of seeding this as part of a communication strategy? I don't think it's that deep, but it's just when you see these things happening in real time, you're just like, could we not all just like have normal lives and just deal with things like
just chill,
adults?
take a breath.
Yeah. To be clear, this is like Friday at what 10 p.m. your time or something like that. Like it was quite late, and normally you get information from one source and you're like, okay, that's interesting, I'm going to try to confirm it elsewhere. And then we sort of we heard it a second time, and we were still sort of sketched out enough by the way that all this was coming to us that we didn't end up writing a story. I'm glad we didn't, because we would have been wrong. Which would have been bad. But like normally you get it from two different sources, you can be relatively confident in that information. And obviously, like I said, we weren't for various reasons. But it is odd that it came to us that way at all. Like like you said, where did this come from? Was somebody just messing with the media? Which
the internet.
But that's been happening fairly it's not been that uncommon recently. Like there's one person that I check stuff with and I'm close enough to that doesn't matter to me, like just firing someone up on WhatsApp, and they reminded me that I was now 0 for 3 on the last 3 sort of rumors that I'd checked out, which usually doesn't, like, not saying that I'm not plugged in like that getting all this information, but there has been a lot of weird rumors, and I think it's just because of all the sort of tumult, I think, between like mergers and all these big stars and how the transfer market's working, is that there's a lot of insecurity and weird things happening.
Somebody suggested that Pidcock was withdrawn. I mean, because bless Ethan Hayter, he's a great rider, mostly on the track and on flat races, but he wasn't going to compete like Pidcock was at Le Lombardia. I didn't actually see him once during the race.
It's not right.
So I think
it was a case. So the suggestion was that maybe there are negotiations ongoing, and Ineos have got somebody to sell. To put it crudely, they don't want to send him off with a broken femur, and risk which sounds a little bit. I mean, we know that you can recover from that, and it seems fairly sketchy. But I think it's, I don't know. I guess there are lots of ways that this seems weird. Also, the way that Ineos Grenadiers social media was, or at least the information from on the ground, was that Ineos Grenadiers is bewildered by what's going on. It's like, dude, this is you doing it.
It's like the hot dog costume person where the car crashes through into the building. He's like, we got to find the guy who did this, and it's a hot dog car. Maybe that's more of a visual meme, but people might know. I think with Ineos, it's just, I think Ratcliffe's had a bit of a wild weekend because the sailing stuff, America's Cup, that's going poorly against the New Zealand team that's sponsored by Emirates. With Manchester United, he's like made Sir Alex Ferguson redundant from his like ambassadorship.
I read that this morning.
So he was getting paid. Sir Alex Ferguson, their long-time manager, was getting paid like $2 million a year. Also, sorry to anyone who is like bored of all the Ineos sort of centric podcasting, but it is like the most interesting story of the year.
We are in off season now, folks. It's not going to be riveting all the time.
Ratcliffe's just going around just sort of just realizing like, oh, I am a billionaire, I own all this stuff, I can I'm sick of Pidcock trying to just do like Olympic mountain bike races, which I don't want him to do really. I'd rather he'd focus on the Tour de France. I'm sick of paying 2 million a year for Sir Alex Ferguson to just come to Manchester United games. And meanwhile, the 100 million I'm spending on this boat thing, that's all turned up for nothing as well. So I think he's just, on a bit of an autumnal rager.
Which frankly is necessary. Like it's clear that Ineos internally is a disaster. Right?
Yeah, it's not happy.
Like
yeah,
it's a mess. It's a mess. And you could blame that on Pidcock. I'm sure that the folks at the top of that organization probably would. But I think you could also do the opposite, right? Like and to be honest, this isn't the only storyline running underneath the chaos at Ineos. So I would think that I would suggest that it is the opposite. That I think that Pidcock is probably like, I'm a very good bike racer and I don't have to deal with this. Didn't he literally say that over the summer? Actually, I think he literally pretty much said that exact thing over the summer. Like,
well, it
was it something in the documentary in the Unchained?
It was both, in the documentary, because I looked this up the other day. He was like, sometimes you just have to make your own decisions or like decide what you're doing, which he said when he was like 24. And it's just like, you know what, fair enough. Like,
well, he has been racing since he was, I don't know, 7 or whatever.
Yeah.
He's
I'm
been
always
on a pedestal for a long time as an individual.
I'm just always inclined
really
to back the riders in these situations because their careers are so short. They're often on the sharp end of decisions anyway.
So one tiny decision can make so much difference as well.
And I always it's always a struggle to actually empathize with an organization or like a multi-million-pound organization of like money that doesn't really matter and is like correcting, a corrective number on a balance sheet. So I hope things turn out for Pidcock. I hope he figures out how to say Q36.5 or however it is, or that he can maybe suggest a new team name.
I think it might be too late for that, but
that's a shame.
Yeah, well, let's leave it there. Like I said, we can confirm that this process to get him over to Q36.5 is relatively far along. We would expect it to either happen or not happen this week. The one thing we can't confirm is it'll definitely happen. We can just confirm that all 3 parties seem to be pretty interested in making it happen. And it's pretty far along. So
yeah,
we'll talk about it next week, I'm sure, with whatever update we've got.
What's going to happen next week in the Ineos world? I reckon
might even be on team camp next week because they're all starting.
I think they could accidentally leave a rider in Guangxi. That's my prediction.
Oh yeah, okay, that would be a good. Yeah, that'd be another good story.
Or one of the Ineos riders is like, you know what, Nanning is lovely this time of year. I'm not dealing with all this stuff that's going on back home. I'm just going to chill out here.
Just DNS on stage 1, except that would have been this morning, so never mind.